the way that I view it is kind of like a, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like a timeline sort of, but it's, I guess, yeah, it's kind of like a circle.
Hey everyone, it's Ivory, and thank you so much for watching Astral Ivory. Today we are going to be talking about parallel dimensions, and I have Amber with us again today, and she will be translating for Spirit. And so we're just going to go ahead and dive right into it. Amber, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, thank you. Okay, so I'm really excited because I'm really obsessed with parallel dimensions. So before we get into it, I wanted to stress the importance of what we humans call as time. And so I'm coming from the standpoint of time being nonlinear, and this includes past, present, future, parallel realities, and any infinite possibility of any future incarnation. Do you feel the same way? Or I don't know if anybody from your spirit team or if Curtis wants to jump in and add to that?
It's just so complex that it's difficult to, like, I don't know, bring out into words, or like for us to really understand, but it's basically like, what I'm being shown is kind of like a sphere, and there's just like this like orange like light inside of it, that just keeps spinning, and that's like, I guess within that is just kind of like just the different times all just kind of intertwining. It's just kind of like at the base of it.
As a spirit, would they be able to, or even an alien, would they be able to bend time or come in? Let's say we're doing this interview tomorrow. Would the spirit have been able to go to the interview like last week?
Um, yes and no. Because they're connected to Source, they have a lot of information, and basically Source has all that information. They're just kind of downloading and are able to grasp it already just because of their connectedness to Source. They are Source. It's like Google, it's like their own like Google, so they don't need to like necessarily go somewhere to see it. They just gotta Google it and it's right there. You know what I'm saying? It's just like a download that happens.
Oh, so do they kind of just like think about it? Is it like an intention?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's say I was given two choices. And
Mm-hmm.
let's say I have a job offer and I want to go to either a job offer in Arizona, here in the US, or in Italy. So let's say I chose Arizona. I moved to Arizona. I live in an awesome neighborhood. I live next to a Whole Foods. I have a great job and I'm ready to start out fresh. And then the second choice in Italy is similar. And let's say I'm already settled in Arizona and like I can't just stop thinking of what life would be like for me in Italy. So now, did I also create a reality of me being in Italy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Every single thought, almost every single idea, every single everything, there are like immediately different parallel dimensions that are created from that. So it's like a nonstop. It's like layers. It's like an onion almost, but like an infinite onion where like things keep, like you have one thought and then all of a sudden there's like seven different possibilities.
And how long does that live on? Does that like live on forever, or does it stop when I stop thinking about being in Italy?
It lives on until it's done. So it's like different, like lifetimes almost.
Oh.
There was years and years ago, I started getting really into the idea of parallel dimensions and like having a way of like manifesting by just changing the reality that you're living in. So it's kind of like every possibility has already been folded out.
So it's like a matter of us just tuning in to that possibility.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but basically that. It's everything is possible, and it's just like it's basically the idea of our existence is not real. It's almost like a dreamlike state in a sense, and it's just kind of like I forgot the word, but when you're like able to control your dreams.
Oh,
You know what I'm saying?
oh, like
It's
lucid
kind of
dreaming?
like that, but you have to do that with your reality. But it's essentially the same thing, because all these possibilities have already unfolded and will unfold, and like it could go any direction, like ever, and it's just
This infinite
trying
realm.
to pull that to you, to make that specific one your reality.
Oh, cool, cool. Okay, so I wanted to touch like a little bit on history. So, so let's say Abraham Lincoln, which I believe is one of our greatest presidents. What if he never became president? Is there a parallel where he didn't become president?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
really, oh, okay. Can they kind of describe what that would be like if he wasn't president?
Sure. I mean, technically, there are like different ways that it could happen. You know, there are different like outcomes that could have happened. Like somebody else could have come to office that did like similar things later on. You know, et cetera, et cetera. But for the most part, um, it's very bleak. It's very like very dark and very like industrious. There's a lot of like metal everywhere, like just buildings made out of metal. So it's just very dark and dusty. Um, it almost kind of reminds me of like in general, it kind of looks like just has the feel of like the Industrial Revolution when it was happening. You know, there's just a lot of factories and a lot of like grime and a lot of like just a lot of like people like all sweaty and greasy from like working with like machines and stuff. Um, this is really random. I'm just like there's like just this one street that this is basically what it looks like. What's interesting is like it nowadays if we were to see it, it would look like there's a lot of poverty, but the people there don't feel it doesn't feel like poverty. Like they feel happy and fulfilled. I think because that's just what the norm is, and that's like what they're striving for. But it's very much on labor. It's almost like you have like the whole place or the whole city that I'm seeing kind of runs off of the labor of the citizens, and that kind of helps the wealthier people. It's almost like having like a hamster run so that you can have electricity or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of like a communist country. Just because everybody, that's all it is. And then there are like wealthy people that kind of rule everything, and then that's kind of it.
Okay. And what about slavery? Would that have been abolished or?
In this specific world, it's almost like the citizens are all slaves. However, they don't really know it. So it's like all of their labor is for the wealthy people that literally do nothing. So like it's almost like like everybody's a slave. Like the wealthy people just control everything. There's only like two classes. There's like wealthy and then non-wealthy. You know, in this non-wealthy class, like literally everybody is technically their slave, but that's just how their reality is. So they don't know that. You know, they don't know anything else.
Okay, you know, how about this one? What if is there maybe one where he never got shot?
Yeah.
Can they pull that one from the files?
There's one that's coming through where it's like he wasn't shot and Kennedy wasn't shot, and it's kind of freaky a little bit. It's like overly like utopian kind of feeling where everybody's like, oh hello, like it's like it's a little bit freaky. There's like not very much darkness, and so everybody's like a plastic, like, oh, this is where we live. Like it's a little bit it's a little freaky.
Is there like mind control going on, or is that just like how everybody is, or maybe they were raised that way?
No, it's just how society. I mean, it's just the traits that like that specific society like grew to have. It's kind of like we're kind of on our own kind of thing. I feel like in this specific world, you know, the rest of the world is having their issues. We're not really involved in any warfare at all. We're just kind of like our own little like safe haven, you know. It's a little bit disconnected from the rest of the world.
And was it more peaceful?
I mean, technically yes, but there's good and bad and good, you know, and it's kind of like there's too much good where it's kind of overweighing the bad. So it's just kind of like not necessarily good in itself. You know what I'm saying? It's just kind of at like a plateau a little bit where there's no like levels, there's no growth really. It's just all like.
Interesting. Okay. So bear with me. This is gonna sound like a quantum math homework question. Okay. So I wanted to see if there would be anything, like if there would be any effect if it was like really mundane. So like let's say I'm going by linear Earth time at 2:05 in dimension A, and I'm going to the drugstore to buy some hand sanitizer. Now, will there be another dimension, we'll call dimension B, where on the same day at 2:05 p.m. I'm going to the same drugstore to buy cat food, because in this parallel I have a cat this time. And so would there be a parallel for this more mundane example, or does it have to be more impactful or more life-changing to have a difference in the parallel, or is it just an infinite amount of possibilities?
It's just an infinite amount of possibilities.
So it doesn't matter how small it is. There's just an infinite.
It can be small. It can be, I mean, like literally in a parallel universe, we could be doing the exact same thing. Whereas in another one, like something, I don't know, crazier could happen where like all of a sudden there's like an explosion out my window. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like it could be anything.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this woman. Her name is Carol McKinley. And she actually believes she did enter a parallel dimension, and so I wanted to see our spirit's take on that. Wait, hold on. What's up? Okay, so back in 2006, Carol McKinley, I don't know if I pronounced that right, so I'm sorry if I didn't, was driving back home to San Bernardino, California, which is actually really close to us. And it's actually an hour from my location, and decided to stop by her hometown in Riverside, California. And so she had been visiting this town since she was a baby and really familiar with the area. And she saw landmarks that were familiar to her, but she was unable to find her childhood home or the houses of friends and family. The address numbers and street names were the same. Riverside City College and Central Middle School were still there, but when she had visited the cemetery in that town, where her grandparents were buried, their graves were gone, and the area was now a vacant lot with no tombstones covered in weeds. Mission Inn was no longer there. University Avenue, an area home to banks, insurance companies, restaurants, hotels, was covered in graffiti and deserted. So then she took out a map to confirm her location. So keep in mind, this is 2006, so smartphones weren't as advanced as now. So she took out the map, and to her knowledge, it confirmed her location to be correct. She claimed she felt this eerie vibe with scary people, and if she left her car, there would be no turning back. So then after an agonizing few hours, she was able to drive back to Paris, California, and then everything was normal. So to make sense of everything, she told herself she had a bad memory and that towns can change really fast. However, when she went back to this town a few years later for her father's funeral, the town was almost exactly as she had left it when she was a young girl. Mission Inn was now there once again. She even had lunch there. University Avenue looked normal, and she also had confirmation from her cousin telling her the old family homes were exactly in the same place she had left them. Also, her father was buried next to the graves of her grandparents, which at this time were definitely there. And so this completely freaked her out, and ever since then she's been fascinated with her experience, and she's been sharing her story. And so, which everyone can also Google as well. And so can anyone say what happened to her? Did she cross into a parallel dimension?
Yeah, it's kind of almost like the Bermuda Triangle kind of deal, where it's just like all of a sudden she was just kind of like through this like portal, like this weird like wormhole kind of thing, For this specific case, it was meant to happen so that she could spread awareness. There was like a bigger reason for this happening. She was meant to do that, so it had to happen. But that's really it. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Interesting. And so is that portal still there?
It's like there's like a slit kind of like in time, but it was specifically open for her. It's kind of like her, like that was her destiny almost. So I mean, you can find it, but it's not necessarily active. It's like been sewed up, Okay.
So if somebody drove down there, they'll probably just be normal.
Yeah.
Okay. And in this location, has this happened to more people besides her?
In this specific location, like 2 or 3 people. It wasn't accidental, but it wasn't as like hardcore, and it wasn't as purposeful. It's kind of like just like getting the tail end of it. Going back and forth between dimensions is very, it's not dangerous, but it's not necessarily, I mean, things can happen unless you know what you're doing. You know, it's not necessarily something to kind of mess around with just like hopping around everywhere. All right, so if you enter a new dimension, it's like a portal opens up and then it like closes immediately. So it's like breathing, you know, so you have so much time to get through it. And then when you exit, you have so much time to exit. It's like opening a sheet, you know, almost, and like going through something, but then it like closes behind you. For whatever reason, after you do it once, you know, it's like if you aren't able to take the exit back out, you have to find another exit, basically. So it's not going to be in the same spot that you originally found it.